Hello, I'm Roger Ward. I'm Vice Chair of the Retail and Distribution Group. I welcome everyone to the group's first webinar on load security. We plan to have 3 in total this year, the second one being on contract to management in September 2018 and one on MSDs in November 2018. So again, welcome to the first of 3 webinars. I would like to introduce you to Imran Siddiqui, who is the HSE lead for transport. We are very privileged to have him as a member of the group committee, and he will be leading this webinar, and I would like to hand over to him now.
Okay, thanks Roger, and hello everybody. My name is Imran Siddiqui. I am an inspector for the Health and Safety Executive, and I work in the transport sector there. Today we're going to talk about load security, and with me is Nina Day.
Hello everybody, my name is Nina Day. I'm Senior Engineer in Road and Workplace Transport for the Health and Safety Executive.
Excellent, thank you Nina. So today we're going to talk about load security, and just to give you a brief introduction to the topic, I'm going to speak a little bit about our the Health and Safety Executive Transport Sector Plan, and then after that I'm going to hand over to Nina, who's going to go through the main principles, common issues and underlying causes, and then a summary at the end. So, the Health and Safety Executive Transport Sector Plan, these were launched in September of last year after consultation with the industry. Historically, the sector strategies, as they were referred to then, they had a number of more specific issues obviously in greater numbers, and we'll work through them over normally a 5-year period. This time, we're picking smaller numbers of high priority areas that will run for approximately 3 to 5 years, depending on the outcome of some of the work we're doing. So what are the HSE's transport sector priorities? Well, there's 3 of them. There are improving the securing of loads, which we're going to talk about today, reducing the rate of ill health caused by musculoskeletal disorders, and increasing engagement on work-related road risk. Now, all these priorities are data-driven, and there are also priorities where we think we can have the most impact. Although improving the securing of loads, there is a little bit of an absence of data on this one, but we know that from a 2015 Transport Safety Committee report, this suggests that 30% of on-road incidents have a work-related element. And that's not to say those 30% are to do with improving the securing of loads, but it just gives you an idea of the impact it may have. And information from Highways England showed that from 2014, the average lane closure time on the strategic roads due to items of or loads falling from vehicles is about 84 minutes. So you think about the knock-on effect to that. Not only is there the risk to other road users, but the knock-on economic effect to all those people stuck in those lanes and the delay in getting those goods moving is significant. So I'm going to hand over to Nina now, who's going to go through the main principles.
The basic principle of load securing is that the combined strength of the load securing system must be sufficient to withstand a force not less than the total weight of the load forward and half the weight of the loads to the sides and the rear. That's to stop the load moving under heavy braking, or when the vehicle's going round a roundabout, or swerving to avoid something in the carriageway. Now, there are 7 main types of vehicle and trailer bodies in commercial use in the UK. And those are box-sided bodies, that's solid-sided lorries and vans, where the load's completely enclosed within the body. Flatbeds and low loaders, the open body types that may or may not have a headboard. Tilt bodies, a European trailer type consisting of a rigid frame with a tarpaulin over it. Curtain siders and taut liners, that's vehicle bodies with rigid rear doors and a headboard and curtains on each side. XL curtain sider bodies, Those are reinforced curtain siders. Euroliners, another European trailer type similar to a curtain sider but fitted with a wooden or aluminium slat system in the sides, and then special body types, for example skip lorries. There are some simple steps you can take to avoid problems with load security. It's really important to assess the risks of what you do to avoid any unexpected problems. Very often after incidents, we find that companies are not carrying out a proper risk assessment, and there are some easily avoidable issues that they're coming across as a result. It's really important to plan the loading operation to make sure the load gets onto the vehicle safely, is transported safely, and can be unloaded safely at the other end. If you're carrying out a multi-drop operation, you must plan for those multi-drop and make sure that the load stays safe after each part of the load has been unloaded. You can't rely on the weight of the load. However heavy the load is, the weight alone will not keep it in place, and friction between the load and the load bed won't keep it in place. It's really important as well to consider load distribution. Make sure, particularly with the multi-drop loads again, that you don't end up with a situation where all the weight is at the front of the trailer and you're overloading the front axles. It sounds like a silly basic thing to say that the light stuff should be at the top and the heavy stuff should be at the bottom, but very often loads are loaded in drop order and you can end up in a situation where the load is top heavy. It's really important to make sure that that load is distributed evenly so the handling of the vehicle isn't affected. Load to the headboard whenever you can. Obviously, sometimes you can't do that. Weight distribution is important, and if you would overload the axle otherwise, you may have to go back from the headboard. But wherever possible, use the headboard or fill any gap between the front of the load and the headboard to stop the load from starting to move forward in the first place. Make sure that you secure loads to the vehicle chassis, using suitable anchorage points if possible, down to the side raves if you don't have enough anchorage points. You shouldn't really be using sheeting hooks to secure loads. They are only there for roping and sheeting, and they are generally not strong enough to use with ratchet straps and chains. The buckle straps that are mounted from the roof on curtain-sided trailers are not suitable for securing any heavy loads, heavy pallets that weigh over 400 kilograms. Heavy loads should be secured with ratchet straps or similar equipment. The curtains of most trailers are not load bearing. They are there to keep the rain off the load and keep it out of sight. You should not be using the curtains as part of the load securing system. The photographs here, the photograph on the left-hand side shows buckle straps on a curtain-sided trailer, and you can see that these straps are not really securing the load in place. The load has moved in transit despite the presence of the buckle straps because there is a gap behind the load and the load can move backwards and forwards. The buckle straps here are only providing containment to the side, and it may not be sufficient containment depending on the weight of the load. Ratchet straps, which can be seen on the photograph on the right, will secure most types of load as long as you choose the correct rating of strap and make sure they're in serviceable condition. A lot of the incidents that I've been involved with over the years have had a fairly short list of causative factors, and these include a lack of awareness of legal duties. It is a very common misconception that the driver is the only person responsible for the safety of the load. Actually, there are duties under the Road Traffic Act 1988. For anyone who causes or permits the vehicle to be on the road, they must take steps to ensure that the load is safe. There are also duties on other parties in the transport chain under the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974. Poor communication through the transport chain is very common in the incidents that I deal with. Information is not being passed on to drivers, it's not being passed on to loaders. I've also seen a lack of training and awareness of the risks being faced for drivers and loaders. Drivers must be given appropriate training for the loads that they're transporting. Very commonly, I see a failure to plan the load, particularly with multi-drop deliveries. Inadequate or no load securing. This is not really nitpicking. We're not talking about one or two straps being missing on a load. We're talking about situations like 2 or 3 straps on a 20-ton load, or straps on a load where you can see daylight through the webbing material, and that's just not sufficient. It's really important to make sure that securing equipment is maintained in good condition. Now, there's no legal requirement to inspect webbing straps in the same way that there is lifting equipment, but it is good practice to look at them on a regular basis, look for obvious signs of damage, and just get rid of straps in poor condition. Making sure that the load is loaded so that it remains in a stable condition, that the weight is distributed properly. These will significantly reduce the likelihood of vehicle rollover or the driver losing control of the vehicle because the load is moving around in the back. Here's some examples of problems that have occurred with loads. The photograph on the left shows an unstable load. It was never stable at the point of loading because the lower tier of pallets couldn't support the weight of the upper tier, and the load was then not secured, leaving it free to move around. The photograph on the right shows a webbing strap in a combination lashing with a chain, which is poor practice because straps stretch and chains do not, and the condition of the strap is extremely poor. This was a completely unsuitable lashing for the load of steel, and that led to a prohibition at the roadside.
So Nina, you go out on a lot of stops with the police and the DVSA. Is this typical of what you find on the road?
It's extremely typical. I think that damage to webbing straps is one of the most common reasons for enforcement action by the police and DVSA.
And what about the state of the pallets themselves?
That, again, that's something that we see a great deal of, unfortunately. Pallets should be loaded so that they're stable without any lashings that are put over them, because at some point the driver is going to have to remove the lashings. So it's really important at the point of loading that companies make sure that pallets are stable and that if they're stacking pallets, the lower tier is strong enough to support the upper tiers. Here's an example of an incident that I was involved in the investigation of a few years ago. This is a double-deck solid-sided trailer returning empty roll cages to store, and on the top deck the roll cages were loaded about 2 metres back from the headboard. Unfortunately, this left them free to move when the vehicle braked, and you can see the results of that. The roll cages came thundering forward straight through the headboard and pushed the cab down onto the road. Fortunately, the driver was not physically injured in that incident, but obviously extremely traumatic, and it was very, very difficult to clear up the mess from that incident. It caused a lot of delay and disruption, not only for that company, but for other companies using the same road. This is a more serious incident that I was involved in the investigation of about 10 years ago now. 24 tonnes of steel being moved around the dock road in Liverpool, again loaded back from the headboard with no load securing, just a tarpaulin over the load to keep the rain off, and the driver was probably doing about 10 miles an hour when he braked for the roundabout. You can see the fire engine in the background parked at. Unfortunately, the steel kept moving forward when the vehicle stopped and the driver was killed. So very, very traumatic incident. It was a dreadful, completely preventable incident. A couple of examples here from roadside enforcement. On the left, you can see a load that has moved inside a curtain cider and it is resting against the curtain. The issue here is it may or may not come out onto the road, but there is a safety issue here during unloading. At some point, that curtain has got to be pulled back. And if the load is unstable and it is moved and it's resting on the curtain, it can fall out onto somebody next to the vehicle.
Okay, just to say that dealing with these unloading issues is typically found at sites that the health and safety executive enforce. And in fact, we've dealt with a number of issues when vehicles with loads bulging out the sides are unloaded and no attempts are made to ensure that the load is safe or go and attack it from a different angle. So there are a number of incidents that get reported to us, mainly via RIDDLE, where loads have fallen on individuals. And in fact, we've had a couple relatively recently.
And I would say as well, we actually have this issue at stop sites with the police and DVSA. When a vehicle is stopped for inspection, the driver will pull the curtain back and items will fall out. Even when there isn't a particularly noticeable bulge in the curtain, the load is still unstable on the back. So it is a common issue. As Imran's mentioned, it's something that the health and safety executive has to deal with on a reasonably regular basis. And it's something that I see at stop sites on a fairly regular basis as well. The photograph on the right here, this is a load that really should have been split between two vehicles. It's loaded extremely high, it makes the vehicle unstable, and the load itself was moving around quite significantly on the road due to the side winds on that particular stretch of carriageway. Another couple of examples from roadside stops here. On the photograph on the left, you can see a strap that was actually being used on a load about to go through the Dartford Tunnel. The driver felt that was quite acceptable, but you can see the significant damage to that strap. Under any kind of serious loading, that strap would just pull apart and the load would be insecure. The photograph on the right, you can see a load that is essentially insecure. Black straps have been used, but they haven't really been put over the load properly, and even if they had been used properly, the load is too heavy. It's over 400 kilograms, and the buckle straps are just not acceptable.
Okay, many thanks, Nina. So just to summarise some of the key points, know your legal duty. It's not just the driver's responsibility when it's on the road. There will be duties under the Act, because a number of these issues will occur or begin or be initiated at sites that either the health and safety executive enforce on or our local authority colleagues. So ensure the goods are secured before a vehicle leaves site. As we've mentioned, it's not just the driver's responsibility. Please provide your drivers with suitable and adequate training, particularly if they're not involved in the loading process. You have to have a system in place really to provide assurance that the load is secure before accessing the public highways.
I think it's important as well that if your system is that the driver checks the load before the vehicle goes out onto the highway, that they know that they can say no to it, that they can bring it back onto site, get it reloaded, and that you will support them in that. It's not enough to say the driver checks the load, but really you don't want him back.
Thanks, Nina. Ensure your system in place to secure diminishing loads, and this is really about drop-offs and collections, multiple drop-offs and collections, and it's to prevent vehicle instability and ensure the load securing equipment is available and in adequate condition for use. So, what is the health and safety executive doing about this, other than reminding people of their duties? Well, there's a lot of work going on in the background. There are a number of working groups came out from our logistics forum last year who are tackling elements of this topic. We are working closely with our other regulator colleagues, particularly the DVSA and particular police forces, to understand a bit more about where these issues occur and who is responsible. And when I say who is responsible, I don't just mean the transport company, because this work is often done on behalf of others. So we need to capture this information and find out ultimately who are involved in the chain and where HSE can focus its activities more. And I'm not just talking about enforcement here. This may well be engagement or improving people's knowledge. But we need to know really where we can focus our attentions on in order to have the greatest impact. So a lot of that work is occurring in the background. And obviously we'll be liaising with our local authority colleagues who have responsibility for sites like warehouses, and we have responsibility for distribution centres in that sort of enforcement and authority split. So we need to work together, not just the HSE and local authorities, but other regulators who have an interest in this, so there is a consistent approach. So many thanks for listening and watching and viewing the slides. I hope it's been really informative for you. We've not gone really in depth because I don't think that this is the forum to do that, but it's really to remind those in relevant organisations and industries of what their duties are, and really that the health and safety executive is taking this, this issue more seriously, as it is part of our priority work going forward for the next few years. So back to you, Roger.
Okay, that's fantastic stuff. Thank you very much indeed, Nina, for a really insightful and informative look into load security. And Imran, thank you very much for your input. We are grateful as always. Thank you very much. So everyone, I hope this has given you focus on the subject of load security and gives you an impetus to look at your own environment and to see whether you have any issues. I'd also like to say that should you have any questions relating to this webinar, there is a list of contact information that you can go to, and you can contact us directly at the RDG group at ioshnetworks.co.uk should you have any questions, and we'll look to address those as soon as we possibly can. Also keep an eye on our group page. We will look to post the most popular questions and the answers to those questions on the group page to keep you all informed. Also, you can follow us on Twitter if that is your wish, and that's at IOSH_retail-dist. So thank you very much for listening and viewing our webinar. I hope you found it useful. And as I say, we have 2 more webinar sessions coming up in the year. And of course, if there are any topics that you would like us to cover in the future, we'd also like to hear from you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.